we're going to get right into it and start with the question that we get asked the most. So how will gathering, utilizing, and measure data, how does it actually help my business? How does it set my agency apart in 2023? And Guy, we're going to start off with you with answering this question.
Okay, sure. Thank you. When I look at gathering and utilizing and measuring data that sets us apart, or sets our agencies apart, I think it's important to first come to the understanding that saying how good we are doesn't work anymore. For years, our industry was built on, the referral sources fell in love with us and we were just great at what we did. Well, those days, if they're not over, are coming to an end as the conditions of participation change, both on the home health and hospital side. And we have to be prepared to take that data. When I heard some 26,000 home care agencies are in this country, all relatively doing the same thing, it's the data that tells the story that separates us from the rest. I lived through that. I have a lot of agencies here in Connecticut. It was the data that separates us. And it's not just a lot of data that frightens and scares and frustrates our agencies, because we've never had to really do that. We've never had to really document an awful lot. What's going to separate us is how we can be that supportive partner with the stakeholders. And when I talk about stakeholders, I'm talking about hospitals, home health, the MA plans, ACOs. They live and die on metrics and on data. Their expectation, because remember, they don't know what they don't know. So this is a great opportunity for us to show them what we can do in the areas of hospitalization, satisfaction, functionality, because those are what they're being measured against in a value-based care system. We provide that same information, we become a closer partner with them.
That's incredible. And it's so good. I love how you said, like, it doesn't work that we just say we're good anymore. We've got to have the data to back that up. And Nicole, I would love for you to share on how gathering and utilizing and measuring data has already set your agency apart. How are you seeing that make a difference in your agency right now, in your outcomes and even your revenue?
So it impacts all avenues of the industry. And in my business, especially when I started, I had no idea what data I was supposed to be tracking. And we weren't tracking any data. And we had really no idea what our business was doing, where we were doing well, where we needed to improve. And once you kind of dive in, you learn a little bit more about, okay, this is a point I really need to track. It kind of helps you laser focus on what is going well in your business. Even outside of looking at, potential referral sources, it helps set a foundation and develop the blueprint for your agency on this is an area that is doing well. I want what's going well. Why is it working? How do I continue this trend? And then also getting to look at all of those things that we don't like looking at that bring us anxiety to figure out why isn't it working and what in that data can we use to improve in that area. And by doing that and understanding all of the different components and data, what's going well, what needs to improve, and implementing those from an inside the agency out, you see that filter out through your services, through your staff, through the interactions that you have with your referral partners, which goes hand in hand with the ultimate goal, which is increasing revenue. And with our business, we've gone from, being in the negatives at the end of the year to really tracking and paying attention to what we're doing and where we need to improve, to being a profitable business that's bringing in revenue finally, which is what we all need as business owners, is revenue.
Yeah, I love that. So really, it's about identifying what is working and what's not working and not having to guess at that. And Clint, with you doing the gathering data within your own multi-million dollar, multi-state agency, and now helping home care owners all across the nation to learn how to really leverage data. How do you think this is really going to set us apart in 2023?
So one thing that I always coach on is if you track it, you can change it. And if you measure it, you can monetize it. And understanding, I love, like Guy and Nicole both hit on some really incredible things. Guy talked about, just saying what we do, we're good at what we do doesn't work anymore. And it's kind of like that. If everyone's special, then no one is, right? If everyone has quality care, then quality care is just average care, right? That's what that means. And then Nicole, when you were talking about it, and I love that you mentioned this, you talked about knowing the numbers of your business is a way that we can actually reduce the stress in our lives. Because if we know what's happening in our business, number one, if we know the numbers and are telling them, right? And that's what Guy's talking about, not just knowing your numbers, but telling people about your numbers, then that's going to set you apart. The next area in 2023 is who wants less stress? Like, who would like less stress? And if you knew that tracking, right, 5 things in your agency could reduce your stress by 30%, who's signing up for that, right? Everybody. So what we really have to understand is what's actually going to set us apart in 2023 and really moving beyond is understanding how if we measure, we can monetize. Monetize doesn't just mean dollars, right? What's the revenue return it's giving to us? Being able to have less stress means we can focus on our business, building those powerful relationships, actually being the owner, not the operator. And that's really where data took me in my business. It took me out of that operator mode, and I grew into understanding what that owner mindset was and thinking like an owner. So really the thing that's going to set you apart this year in 2023 with data is thinking like an owner, not an operator.
Yeah, that's so good. And it leads us perfectly into really the next question that we're always getting. And a lot of times we're the ones going in and really evaluating and analyzing. And that's what are the signs that a business is not operating on their data? And Guy, what are you seeing? What are you seeing when it comes to really looking at the signs and knowing, man, okay, we're not operating on our data?
I always like to set up my data internally and externally. And what I talked about in our first question was a lot of external data to separate us from the pack. Internally, look at what we tend to look at, and I think is important, kind of narrowed down to a few bullets, because I learned a long time ago, if you do too much, all I'm going to do is frustrate the heck out of my staff. So, I look at things like a high caregiver turnover. Why are we losing caregivers? We use Home Care Pulse a lot for benchmarking. And, if we fall below some of those benchmarks, every month when we look at these surveys, we ask the question, why? Why is that happening? How do we change that? We look at the client turnover. What is what's the data telling us as to why our average length of stay is maybe shorter than the rest of the industry? And what are we doing not to retain them internally? What I think is a huge piece is the cost of care per service line, because it that drives your margin, and that sets you up to deal with, especially in the MA space. If you don't know what your cost of care is, it's really hard to settle on any type of contracts, because in 2 years, the contracts don't change. And if you don't know your true cost of care per line and per service, and that cost of care includes, the liability, not just the base rate, let's say the base pay rate, but whatever your liability is, you've got to make sure you tack that on to get the margin. And then the last is, we do a lot of tracking lost hours. These are lost hours that have come in, they're scheduled, and either because of the client or because of our caregiver, that now got canceled. And so look at and say, how many, because the hours translates into revenue. And how many of those hours are we leaving on the table? And we do that weekly to say, okay, at the end of the month, if we were able to recoup 25% of that, what did that translate to? And instead of trying to recoup 50, we start at something small and to see why and who was the driver behind that. So those are the, there's a lot of internal ones, but those are kind of several that we've adopted here that I think are very valuable.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what I really see this question as, especially after hearing you talk about that, is like, really, what are the red flags that are popping up in your business? Because if you've got a lot of red flags, that means you're not operating on your data. You may not even know your data. And Nicole, what are some red flags that's kind of popped up in your business that you realized, wait, I wasn't acknowledging or leveraging the data in this area?
So for me, it was once I knew what I was looking for, I recognized that it started with me. I realized that when I started to stress or feel overwhelmed because the revenue wasn't there, I realized that was on me. I wasn't tracking enough data, or I wasn't tracking the right data. So I started looking at things from the very base of the foundation. What is my client turnover rate? What's the lifetime expectation of my clients with my agency? What does it cost me to have that client for that long? So once I started looking at those, and I really put a focus for my business on my staff and my staff satisfaction. Because I kind of operate with a philosophy of it. My job is to serve my staff so my staff can serve my clients. I can't impact everybody that I have on my client roster, but I can through my staff. So if my staff are happy, I'm not having all of this revenue or this loss of revenue in client turnover or staff turnover, which then resulted in less client turnover, which then resulted in my clients staying with my agency longer. So for me, it was starting kind of with myself, recognizing the triggers that I had and figuring out where the focus needed to be put in those areas that were not doing so well, because we were doing a lot of things right, but I worried and didn't track the things that we weren't doing well. I knew what we weren't doing well, but I didn't want to put the focus in because I didn't want it to be real kind of thing. So once I kind of pulled my head out of my behind and was like, you got to either make this work or not, then I was like, all right, we started looking at the tough things that people didn't want to, that I didn't want to look at. And that's where we started. And it started with our staff.
Yeah, that's awesome. So good. And I love hearing just the real world scenario. And Clinton, what are some red flags that you instantly look for to really be able to not only see, but to help explain and show someone they're not operating on their data?
For me, I think really what Guy and Nicole both have said, I honestly, I could parrot it. Like I could just echo everything they said, because if you run down the list, and I want you to ask yourself this question, okay? My business is not operating on data if I'm overworked and overstressed as the owner, if my revenue is lower than I want it to be, if my client satisfaction rate is reducing or declining, or I'm not seeing a rise. I'm not operating on data if my turnover rate doesn't seem to be moving on, it just goes down or it just goes up, right? So if you answered yes to one or any of those, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, But I could tell you, I could raise both of my hands to that in my agency. And if I did yoga, I'd probably raise a foot too, by saying, I say yes to multiple of those things. And when I answered that question, is data for me? I was a resounding yes. So if you just answered yes to any of those things, then make sure you put your cell phone down, put your pencil down, right? Get tuned in, because data's for you and it's most indeed for your business.
So good. And that really, when we're talking about red flags, we also got to talk about those blind spots. And what are some blind spots that each of you had in your business, and what happened when you identified them and you began to work on those blind spots? What kind of difference did you begin to see? And maybe give us an example of a blind spot that you had, that you identified, and the outcome for really addressing it. And Guy, we'll start with you.
I really like this question, actually. It talks about, the blind spots, because as owners and operators, sometimes, we get blinded by just, getting on that mouse wheel and go and go and go. One of the blind spots that really came across loud and clear is when we started back in 2016 pulling data together. And I thought more was better. Just get that data in, and we're gonna solve the problems of this whole industry. And I realized really, really fast that all I was doing was frustrating the heck out of my staff. I was a little bit like the, chasing my tail, because I felt we had to be different. We had to get the data. We had to supply the data. The struggle was, at that time, we really didn't know what the exact data we should be collecting, because we never really had to the degree we should be. And then when we realized the data that we need to collect should reflect what our stakeholders are collecting, that narrowed down that scope from this giant, chasm of data to 4 simple points. And once we realized that, and I shared it with the staff, you could feel that collective sigh of relief, and they instantly started to buy into it, because now, instead of trying to track 15 different things, we were tracking 4. And they focused on that. And those were the same 4 that, again, the hospitalization, the satisfaction, the falls, functional measurements, were things we were really doing every day, just never tracking it in a formal kind of a way. And once we realized that, we got instantly, people bought in. Staff started to realize, hey, this is really working, because what they saw was an increase of referrals. They saw that those who we wanted to partner with were receptive to seeing the dashboard that we had put together, that blended in with what their pain points, their challenges were. So our compelling value started to be the using of the correct data for that purpose. We were now able to quantify what we were doing in a very much more simpler format than what I had thought we needed. And it probably, if I didn't get the pushback, quite honestly, and the reluctance from the staff and the frustration, because I realized I can't go anywhere without this staff. They are my backbone. They're the engine. And once we collectively figured that out, we found it worked a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that. So already the peace of mind of knowing, man, there's just four major things. And we're definitely going to make sure that hopefully we learn those 4 by the end of this. But I would love to hear from you, Nicole. What were some blind spots that you really identified in your business? And when you began working on those blind spots, what were the outcomes?
So when I really started to focus in on the blind spots in my business, the biggest blind spot that I found was with my staffing. My staff didn't feel connected to the agency or the mission or the values of what we were doing, and they didn't feel supported, and they didn't feel confident in what they were doing. And home care is already a very autonomous job because you're in the field, you're only working with your clients, you're not having a lot of interaction with your office. The only time you're hearing really from the office is, hey, can you pick up a shift? There was no connection. And so for me, that was the biggest blind spot. Is I needed to support my staff better. I needed to build a system within my business where my staff didn't necessarily need to have access to me, but they needed to have access to individuals who they knew supported them, they were concerned about them, and they wanted to see them succeed in what they were doing. And once we really put our focus on our staff and empowering our staff, we saw an immediate change. We increased our training, our education, our outreach to our staff, and that started to immediately change the way that people felt about working for our company, how they talked about the company to our clients and to clients' families. And we immediately saw a change in the amount of referrals that we were getting because they were talking to everybody. They love their jobs. They love to come to work. They love their clients. They're wanting to get extra logo apparel so they can wear it just on the days that they're not working, so they can hand out cards to people in McDonald's. And we get calls all the time in our agency that, hey, I talked to one of your staff at Burger King and they gave me a card. I just want to hear about, like, how can my mom get signed up to come to your daycare program? And so for us, it affected in a positive way every area of our business. We were at about an 80% turnover rate. And once we started to focus on staff and putting our focus of importance on educating and supporting our staff, we're down to about a 41%, which in this industry is extremely difficult to get to. But we've got an amazing group of caregivers that care and are proud of what they do and who they work for.
Wow, that's incredible. Right now, if anybody is questioning, does data work for them and can they leverage it? I don't think there's any more question to really, really know it's super important, and it's important to leverage it. And Clinton, what are some of the biggest blind spots that you see working with home care owners from every level, from 1 million to $12 million in revenue? And when they've identified the blind spots and then worked on them, the outcome that they get?
Every time I sat down with an owner and we start digging into what I call the master operator mindset, right? So digging into that, one of the first things that we tackle is a blind spot to results. And so often in our business, we are taught, and as owners, we are absolutely focused on results, right? When you look at data, you see results, okay? So action happened, results happen. However, there's a bias to results in our mind, because when we see a result, we see a good result or a bad result. And the truth of the matter is there's no such thing. And really, there's not. And work with me here, because there's actually not a good result or a bad result. There simply is results. Now, what determines if they are good or bad is if you want them repeated in your business. That determines if you want to continue that result or not. So a lot of times we stop. The blind spot that I've seen in home care owners at every level is when they get a result, they stop at the result and try and change the result instead of identifying. And this is what happens once we've identified these blind spots, right? Worked on them. What they do is they start identifying the intentional outcomes that they want. Once you establish your intentional outcome, then you evaluate your results based on how they get you to that outcome, right? I call it a chaos funnel, right? Once you understand your end result, then you can evaluate your known variables, what's helping, what's hurting, right? Then you simply do the thing, take the action that's going to get you there. And I love what Nicole said, and I wrote this down. That turnover rate is difficult to get, right? So when she said 41%, I'm sure a bunch of us out there went like, whoa, right? That's incredible. What? And then she followed it up with, and in this industry, that's difficult to get, right? But let me ask you something. Is anything she said she did sound difficult to you? Now, really think about it. Does it actually sound difficult, or did it just sound intentional? So a lot of times the blind spots that I see is this preconceived notion that change is difficult. The only thing difficult about change is accepting the outcome. That's really the only thing difficult. For us, if we know what that outcome is before the change happens, then we're not having to accept anything. It's just confirming what we already know.
Oh man, that is so good. So good. So the big question right here that we're all wanting to know is, what are the most important KPIs, that word we're always hearing and always questioning? What is the most important KPIs that providers should be tracking to measure the success of their business in 2023? And Guy, you've already alluded to there's four major data points that we should be tracking. So we are going to start with you.
Okay, I look at internal, obviously the KPIs, but I also have external, what I like to call key performance metrics. And internally, we touched on a few of those, but the billable hours, I look at sales close ratio, where how many inquiries are coming in. We talked about lost hours and the client retention. We kind of touched on those already. I like even the caregiver acquisition costs. Nicole talks about turnover. Well, there's a cost to bringing people in. What are we spending on that? And then for me, obviously, my drive is on the external side, and I look at, and is very similar. Didn't come up with these famous ones. It's already out there. It's part of the whole value-based care model. It's part of that quadruple aim, and it's about tracking rehospitalizations, functionality evaluations, falls, and satisfaction. You put your arms around those four, you could, and it doesn't matter who you're preparing that for, because every one of our stakeholders have the same exact pain points. Hospitals might have a little different in a 30-day rehospitalization versus a home health that's dealing with value-based purchasing and PDGM, but they're all being measured against those four. Every one of those has a financial implication. So as an agency, the most important KPIs or KPMs are those that are going to have an impact on the referral sources and our clients that meet that total whole patient care, whole client care. That's all we hear about today, is about being that holistic care. Well, by providing these right KPIs and KPMs, we position ourselves to be successful in 2023, internally and externally.
That's incredible. And it's good to know that it's not about tracking the 600 KPIs that we are always hearing about, but it's really knowing what's important. And it's the simple things, the things that are easy to track, the things that we should be tracking, that we need to make sure we have a good handle on. And Nicole, obviously tracking your data and tracking your KPIs have made a major difference in your business in a growth way from revenue and a team standpoint. What have you found to be the most important KPIs for owners to be tracking?
So what we tend to track on a pretty regular basis and keep a real close eye on, and I've already kind of touched on it, is the staff satisfaction, because that kind of filters out into everything that we do. But we also keep a real close eye on our client satisfaction. In our industry where we're at, we don't work a lot with hospital systems. We're very rural. We don't have a lot of hospital systems in our area. So our referral sources are coming, we're very Medicaid waiver heavy in our area. We work a lot with the VA. So we're still tracking our referral sources, but we don't have the capability to go and visit them and see them. So we're tracking our communication with them, the tone of our communication that we're having with them. We also track as well as the good things, we track the bad things. So we're tracking client complaints, we're tracking concerns from case managers that we get, because we want to know the good things as well as the bad things. And ultimately, all of those things, kind of like Clint talks about his chaos funnel, if you look at everything in a funnel aspect, it all kind of helps filter out as much revenue as possible. I think there are very, specific KPIs that every home care agency has to track to be successful. But then there's also those specific things because of your industry, because of your region, and your type of referral sources. You have to kind of adjust and change some of the more specific KPIs to what works best for your industry and for your area.
Yeah. Hey, that's incredible. And you referenced the chaos funnel. And I know in home care, the chaos funnel has become the new wave. Chaos, here's my funnel. So Clint, I'm going to ask you this question from the chaos funnel theory that you have. Really looking at your chaos funnel, and you can tell us what that is, but what are those most important KPIs that you should be tracking, and how do you use the chaos funnel to really identify those?
All right. So the chaos funnel in its simplest form, right? And trust me, it was designed to be, I'm a pretty simple guy. Believe it or not, like I actually really love super simple things. So it was designed to be really simple. And it works off three main factors. Okay. So number one, it's about controllable outcomes. So the top level of our chaos funnel really starts with knowing what your end result is, what that controllable outcome is, that ultimate unmovable outcome that simply must occur, right? Then it goes to the known variables, what's helping or hurting you from actually achieving that outcome. Lastly, and see, it's only 3 steps, is what is the skill, the mechanics involved, the daily actions or tasks that's actually going to move the needle? What's going to make it happen? So if we look at this through that chaos funnel, because remember, it's not about controlling chaos, right? We can't control chaos. We can only control our response to it, right? So it's controlling the flow of choice. So in this, what are the most important KPIs? I always call KPIs because I think this is like a merry-go-round terminology. And when people say KPIs, it's like, ooh, what's the best KPI? It's the ones that move the needle in your business. What's the ones that move the needle in my business? Well, you need to track those good KPIs. And it's like you just go in this circle, right? At the end of the day, the most important KPI to track, and it's actually only one, okay? Get ready. The most important thing to track is the thing you can track consistently. Right? So everything else, when we look at KPIs and we're like, okay, you look at the Home Care Pulse and they have an insane list of KPIs that is so valuable, right? You take their benchmarking study, you do the survey, and you have like this numerous page cheat sheet of things to track in your business. It's amazing, right? But when we get that, a lot of times we're like, oh my God, I can't ever do that. So what I challenge you to do, and if you really want to see success in your business in 2023, if you want to measure success in your business, start simple, right? Simplicity is the simplest way to succeed. Pick one thing. If you aren't tracking a lot of things right now, and tracking seems daunting, and how am I going to get this Excel sheet, or how am I going to get right? If all that seems big, then just start tracking one thing, because I promise you, tracking data is an addictive characteristic. When you start tracking data, all of a sudden, like you're like, I'm tracking this. Oh my God, I could track this too. And I could track it. And you start like adding. I love how Nicole's laughing, right? Because it's addictive. And you get so excited about it. But if we bring that excitement in the beginning, because we're thinking like owners, right? Not operators. We're bringing that excitement in the beginning to our team who is thinking like operators and employees, then all they see is more work. But if we begin and we start with simple wins, what's quick wins? Don't track the crap that's like ruining your life right now. Yes, you want to adjust that, but your team hates it. They hate the idea of it. So give them something good to track, something that they can see the value of tracking, because a quick win builds confidence in the person and the process. You know what? They'll probably be like, hey, this Tom, this Tom, he knows what he's doing. This Susan, man, she's got her game on. And you know what? We actually tracked this and I saw a difference, the person and the process, right? So filter it through the chaos funnel. What's your end result? What's the actual controllable outcome? What's going to help or hurt it? And then what's the action you can think? At the end of the day, do the thing.
I love that. I love that. Chaos, here's my funnel and here's the data to prove it. So no, and once we have collected our data, what's the next step? And I think there's already been so many actionable steps that they've already talked about right here. But we want to make sure that everybody walks away with that clear next step for once you've got your data, because a lot of you already have the data. You're already tracking the data and you may not even realize it. So what is the next step for once you've got your data collected? And Guy, what is everybody's next step for once they've collected the data of their business?
And Clint, you said it too, is I think once you've collected all, keep it simple. Okay, I'm a big KISS principle. I follow that principle religiously, because the simpler you can keep the data that reflects the outcome in a tangible, quantifiable way, your staff is going to get it better and understand it. The referral sources are going to get it. Your partners are going to get it. I like to take that data, keep it simple, that talks their talk, that's something they understand, and work through it. And if you're getting results, brag about it. We got the home care, the Pulse gives out their awards. Okay, we've been blessed and fortunate. We've done really well. We brag about that. And when we brag, your staff feels a different level. Nicole, you said it as well. When they get it and they feel supported and they feel that what they're doing makes a difference, that's the best you can have. And so, again, I go back to the beginning. Once we had that data collected from the external standpoint, we were able to go out and show it, and we saw the results. That just took everybody to a different level. And, we do monotony breakers here. We do the high fives and we celebrate our success. So that's what I would say. That once you collect the data, the next step is synthesize it, keep it simple, celebrate it, and brag and have fun with it.
I love that. I love that. And Nicole, what would you say an owner's next step is of really utilizing that data?
I think it's very simple. Take action. I feel like all of this data is useless if you don't use it to your advantage. If you're good at something, like Guy said, shout it from the rooftops, brag about it, be unapologetically excited about what you're doing well, and keep doing it. if there's something that you're finding from your data is not going well, put a process together and fix it. Otherwise, you're just going to stay stagnant. So my suggestion or recommendation is just take action, which I learned from Clint and Jessica.
Awesome. I love that. And Clinton, we're going to wrap this up with you. And you are and the next step is, that is your famous line. So what is, and the next step is for the owners and their data collection?
And the next step is, if you get anything out of today, and I know you have taken a ton out of today. I've taken pages of notes, and whatever you get out of today, understand that and the next step is one of the most important things you'll ever say, because just taking action doesn't do a lot, right? Because we take action in our business every day, but it's the intentional action that matters. And there's a quote that Jessica loves, and it's from The Art of War. And it says, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And I want you to really let that sink in, because what that means is you can take all the strategy from today, and we've given a ton. I mean, these experts have given their hearts to you today. But if you don't do anything with it, then yeah, you can adjust over time and maybe learn a little bit, but that success won't really be there. But you can go out and take all the action in the world, but if you don't take one thing from today that you're going to focus on and actually do that thing, right? What's the next step? So out of these 5 questions that we've given, y'all have taken pages of notes. Wonderful. I love that. Congratulations. Now pick one thing. Okay. What's the one thing you're going to do? We call it a plan for Monday, right? In our coaching program, that's what we call it. What's your plan for Monday? Because it doesn't matter if we just know all of this, if the knowledge is in us, right? Our brains were made to create ideas, not store them, right? So it doesn't matter if we just hold all this knowledge in. We have to do something with it. So my challenge to you is, once you've collected your organization's data, no matter what it is, what you're learning today is data for your organization, right? You're taking in data. Data isn't just numbers, right? And geometry, right? Data is the collection of information. So you've collected information for your business today. Now distill it down to the number one thing. And I actually want you to do something for me, because, right, and the next step is go to Home Care Operators Community, all right, and post and the next step is. What's your next step? What step are you taking? Put it there, tag Nicole, tag Guy, tag me, tell us what your next step is, and let us support you in that journey.
So incredible. Oh my gosh. So many golden nuggets, so much information. And the great thing about it is, was any of this complicated? No, it was all super simple. So as home care owners, it's really about us first understanding why it's important. Check. I think we all can agree that it's super important that we are collecting our data, but going beyond that, we're analyzing our data, we're leveraging our data, and we're letting data do the work for us. Data can tell us what's working, what's not working, what to improve, what to do more of. So I'm super excited about hearing about the outcomes that you're going to see when you really begin to dig into your data, begin to fall in love with your data. I wasn't a data person. I can say that. Nicole wasn't a data person, but now we love data. Like a Guy, I'm not sure if Guy was a data person, but I tell you right now, he's an expert when it comes to data. So I am looking forward to hearing about all the great things that you are taking away. Awesome, guys. That was incredible.
And you're right, Jessica. I'm not a data person. People will tell you, if it wasn't for some of my staff, I wouldn't know how to put a spreadsheet together. But and I was one of those, okay, I got to really keep it simple, because I have to understand it first. And If I got too complicated, I'd go back to the typewriter, for God's sakes. So and that's the excitement that we talked about, taking that data, letting it tell our story, and having fun with it.
Yes, I was the same way. Like data was overwhelming to me. And even entering it into an Excel sheet or my software system was overwhelming. I literally started collecting data on my weekly planner. I literally took the ruler and drew out my lines and this is what I'm going to be tracking. I want to track it every week and I'm going to compare it at the end of every month. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong. Data is smarter and knows more about my business than I do. And then that's literally the simple step that I started at. And then I was like, man, if I did this in Excel could do the math for me and it'd be even easier. So then I started doing it in Excel, and then I was like, oh my God, my operating system has so many data metrics that I'm not even utilizing. I'm going to add that into it and I could begin to see so much more. So it's all about starting small, getting a quick win, getting a quick outcome, seeing the difference that it can make. And like Clint says, get good at one thing and then get great at two. And then when you get great at two, go get good at three things and then great at four. You can continue adding, but you got to start by getting good at one thing. Then you can get great at two and keep going.